All right, and we are live. Welcome back with Murphy Mac to another episode of the Fitness Beginner Podcast, where we help you get started on your fitness journey. How's it going, everybody? Hope y'all having a great week so far. We have a cool podcast topic for y'all today. We have an interview with Dr. Jim Walter. We're going to bring him onto the screen now. Here he is, and just to get started, just go ahead and just let everybody know, just a quick glimpse of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Murphy. And first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and your listeners. As you mentioned, my name is Dr. Jim Walter. I'm trained. I have a PhD in cardiovascular exercise physiology, and I spent 10 years doing preventive and rehabilitative cardiology. Uh, then spent a little over 25 years in the pharmaceutical industry, which took a different path for me. But I'm here today because during this time, I've always had a passion about preventive medicine, and I think I can do more about that. And I'll get into this in more detail in the podcast, but I'll let you ask me about why I would consider myself a frustrated exercise physiologist, and I'll explain that. And it's because I think we need to try a different message for a lot of people to get on the fitness journey that you just talked about. So that's why I'm here. And again, thanks for having me as a guest.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining. I always like to get to, talk to people that are, kind of professionals in their field just to learn more about, fitness as a whole. I tend to keep things on like a basic level just for the podcast, but when I have guests on, I like to, dive deeper into topics so we can get other opinions and get more detail on certain topics. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. A
Perfect.
second ago, you mentioned preventative measures or medicine. And so I just want to get like what is your idea of preventative? I think you said medicine or measures. I think you
Yeah.
said medicine. So what do you,
Yeah.
what is your idea of preventative medicine? I know that's a wide topic, but
Yeah. No, it's a very big topic and it's a broad topic. And I guess I'll start by answering that with, and I want to be clear, except for an unfortunate few, most people are born into this world with good health. We do know of genetic anomalies that unfortunately afflict some people, but that's not the majority of people. And so we're given, whatever your belief is, we're given this good health. And I believe it's our responsibility to protect that, to preserve that. I mean, the name of my company is the Institute for the Preservation of Health. So it even goes back a step before even preventive medicine. Preventive medicine, the typical definition is trying to um, minimize the risk associated with risk factors like high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, smoking, physical inactivity. And we do that to lower our risk for cardiovascular disease. And there is another term that you may not have ever heard of applied, but it's called primordial prevention. And that's the prevention of the development of risk factors. And that's where I'm going. I think it's our responsibility to do that. You're given this gift. If you were given a brand new car, or if you're a boater, you were given a brand new boat, you're going to take care of it.
Mhm.
And I think we as individuals need to do a better job of taking care of our own health and thereby preventing the development of diseases, and being a part of our own health care. So that's where I'm going to go with my messages. And as I said, I'll give some examples, but that's what I'm really talking about with preventive medicine.
Yeah, I liked how you mentioned if somebody gave you a car or a boat, you would take care of it. Well, like your body is the one you only get one. You only get one body. So you gotta take care of it. It's the one thing that like you can't buy. Money can't buy, a healthy body. Yeah, it could help in certain areas, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you got to do the things that you have to do to take care of your body because you only get one, and you can't money just can't buy that for you. So I think that's very important. That
Yeah. And even if it could, as you suggested, even if it could, it doesn't put it back to the way it was.
yeah,
It it's like taking a damaged car and banging out the damage that's done on the wheel, but you really
Hmm.
didn't get rid of the problem. And that's where taking this responsibility, and the reason I say it's our responsibility is because we are the ones that live with our health every day. I've done this before to patients that I've worked with who unfortunately have diabetes. And I'll ask them, who's responsible for managing your diabetes? And they'll say, well, my doctor, my endocrinologist. And I say, oh, okay, really? They're like, yeah. And I said, all right, then let me ask you a question. How many days of the year do you have diabetes? And they look at me with this incredulous look on their face, like, what are you asking? And obviously it's every day. And I said, then how many days of the year do you see your physician or your endocrinologist? And it's maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year, depending on how bad their diabetes is. And so if you have it every day and you only see a healthcare professional 2, 3, 4 times a year, who's really responsible for managing it? And that's a condition. I'm just saying now our health. It's our responsibility, as you said, one body. So it's really our responsibility to try to take care of it every single day. And that's what I'll get into more with my message about trying to encourage people to move more, because we're not really doing a great job with getting most Americans to exercise.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction I want to go. You talked about moving more. You talk about daily movement a lot, and I think that's great. It's a great message to preach. And I was wrong in this a few years ago because I used to think like walking was was not enough. I was one of those people. I
Right.
was like, you got to do something more than just walking. But now I've completely like switched my mindset. Like I think walking is a great activity for the majority because most people can do walking. Like most people can. Most people are not going to
Yeah.
go to the gym, 5 days a week and work out, but they can go for a walk, 3, 4, five
Yeah.
days a week. So I think it's a great tool to use that pretty much most people can do, and it's great for daily activity, like you like to talk about. So yeah, I highly recommend people going for walking, especially for beginners. Start there before you try to
Yeah.
dive deep into running or going to the gym or whatever it is. So what's kind of your ideas around just daily movement, and
Yeah.
what are some
Yeah.
ways
So,
people can do that?
and you're right. Walking is a wonderful form of exercise, and it's something that nearly everybody can do. But what then limits people who can do it and want to do it is time. We're so busy that I can't even find time to go for a 30 or 45-minute walk during the course of a day. And let me take a step back and then go into this frustrated exercise physiologist concept. And what I mean by that is that, I truly believe, and I don't think I'd get any argument from you, that in exercise, with decades of research, we have arguably the most potent form of medicine known to mankind. It impacts, we thought originally it was just really associated with cardiovascular type diseases. Now we know it impacts almost any kind of chronic disease in a positive way. But if you were to go onto the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website right now, and put in US physical inactivity, you'd learn that 25%, a quarter of Americans, are completely sedentary. So that's nearly 100 million people, since we're about almost at 400 million people in the United States. And then as much as 60% don't meet the definition of what is considered exercise. And that's also put forth by the CDC. 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity each week. So here we're telling people the most potent form of medicine, and most people don't do it. And me and you and others can continue to promote this. And by the way, I would love for everybody to exercise, but most Americans don't. So we can continue to do more research, to continue to define the type, intensity, duration, and frequency that people need to do and put it out there. But in 50 years, we haven't changed the amount of people that do it. So my message is so what I'm trying to do is just change the message. So if we can't get people to exercise, How about if we just start by simplifying it for everybody and just getting them to move more? People say, okay, that's great. That's something like taking the steps instead of the elevator. Right. And maybe parking your car further in the parking lot and walking it. Exactly. But after those two, people go completely blank in terms of coming up with other ways that they can move more. And so, what I do when I speak to people or to audiences is I give ways throughout the day that you can just build more movement into your day. Just move more. Like if I were to stand up from my chair right now, that's movement I otherwise wouldn't have done. Now, that in and of itself, it's not going to have a health benefit. But my message is to get people to build, and I'll give more examples as we go on, but give specific examples of how you can go through your day and not need to designate time, but change what I like to say is re engineer your day so that it would include movement where you otherwise might be sedentary. And that's what I'm talking about moving more. Providing a suggestion that everybody can do that can get them on a path to moving their body more, which hopefully could eventually lead to exercise, but at least doing more than they currently are.
So I've always wondered this. So why do you think people choose not to exercise? You just mentioned like people know they need to do it. It's the best. You said it could be the best medicine that's known to man that's out there, and everybody knows this at this point. Like there's tons of research that goes into it, but yet people still choose not to do it. It's kind of like the whole. It's kind of like I compared it to like smoking cigarettes. Everybody knows smoking cigarettes is terrible for you, but yet
Yeah,
people still do it. Like I don't understand. I can't understand that.
yeah,
I don't get why people don't do that. I,
yeah,
I don't know. So what? Why are people
yeah,
like just actively choosing, not to work on their health? I mean, they don't let. It's going to get to the point to where they're basically dying, and you don't
yeah,
want it to get to that point, and that people will let get to that point before they take it seriously. For like, oh well,
yeah,
maybe I should start exercising. Well, like, how do we get
yeah,
people to close that gap? Like, not
yeah,
not wait until it gets to that point. Like, we need to start
right,
exercising now, and not
yeah.
wait until it's absolutely critical.
So I think there's a couple of there's several reasons to answer your question. I'm going to focus on two. The first one is people say I don't have time, and
Hmm.
then the second one is it's too hard. I'm not ready for that. So let me start with the second one first. And that's where I'm really trying to simplify things. So you exercise, you're in good shape, correct?
Correct.
So if I were to suggest to you to go to Nepal next week and climb Mount Everest next week, are you ready for that?
No.
No. And so I think when we tell people you need to exercise, which means, and they can Google it too, 150 minutes or more of moderate to vigorous physical activity, they look at that and they think about that they're doing nothing, and then they say, too hard for me. Just like it would be too difficult for you to go to Nepal next week and climb Mount Everest. So I think that's the first thing is we set a gap that's too large for people to overcome. And then they choose just not to do it at all. And then the second one is the time factor. And so this is where you can and what I do when I talk to groups is I give them ways that they can build now this more movement into their day without needing more time. So let me give you some more examples. We talked about taking steps instead of the elevator and parking further. And it's just move more. It's just simple things. I will also cite some data that says very small, subtle, consistent movements can have health benefits. Not the extreme health benefits that exercise provides, but it will have health benefits for some. So it's the morning, and you get up, and I'm still old fashioned. I get a physical newspaper in the morning, which is directly out my front door. And what most people are going to do is walk right out their front door and get it and come back in. But could you consider going out your side door or your back door and walking around your house to get the newspaper and come back. Just a simple activity. You're not going to reprogram your day because it took you an extra minute to go get the newspaper. You're just going to go about your day. That minute won't matter. But you do that. Same thing then if your mailbox is out the front door. Can you go out that way and do it? If you're at your office and you're working and it's time to refill your water bottle, can you do it on a different floor than the one you work on? Again, it's not going to add more time to your day. You'll just absorb that. Or instead of instant messaging somebody from your computer who's right down the corridor, can you get up and walk and talk to them instead? So now you're just moving more. You know, when you come home, and let's take a young adult, a parent, for example, who's got a 6, 8, and 11-year-old at home. You know, you're not going to go home to your 6-year-old and say, "Hey, sweetheart, how would you like to grab some dumbbells and go out for a power walk with me?" That's not going to work. But what if you asked your 6-year-old, "How about if we go outside and see how many cracks we can count along the sidewalk? Or see how many different trees we can identify? Or flowers or birds, whatever." And if you do something like that, you actually accomplish 3 important objectives at one time. You move more, you spend some quality time with your child, and depending on what you go out to do, you might even contribute to their education. And then you got the 8 and the 11-year-old that needs to go to their soccer or softball or baseball practice. And it's those parents that pull up to the soccer or ball field, let their child out to go practice, reach into the back seat or their hatchback and pull out their lawn chair and sit and watch that practice for 60 to 90 minutes. And they'll tell you, "I don't have time to go for a walk." Because we've just are so programmed that that's not what I do. And so this is how you can find the time and minimize the amount of physical effort to just move more throughout the day. And I'll cite one quick study, and then we can go on to other questions. And it was from a journal called the Mayo Clinic Proceedings. Most people have heard of the Mayo Clinic. And in 2020, they published an article indicating that the mere fact of going from sitting to standing, not just once, but throughout your day, resulted in small but statistically significant decreases in resting blood sugar and body fat mass. So if a little bit of activity can have a little bit of a difference, let's just get started. And by the way, going back to your other thing, and you've probably have heard this said, and you will hear it more in 5 or 10 years, but sitting is going to become the new smoking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually like that a lot. I've said that a few times on the podcast. And you talked about standing up. So I work a desk job at work. So I have one of those little desk riser things. So I try to
Yep.
sit up and stand down, stand up and sit down as much as I can. And then I also have one of those like under desk treadmills that I'll use sometimes. So there's good ways to, get some more movement in if you work a
Yeah,
desk
if you
job like
look
me.
right over that shoulder, that's my walking treadmill right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I have 2 desk setups. This is the one for I use personally. The one over my shoulder is the work one because I still do work in the pharmaceutical industry as I'm transitioning into a public speaking more of a business. And yes, that desk is on a button, and I raise it up and down and walk all the time. And I just think about why I didn't do this all the time before. Um, so yeah, I'm totally with you on that, and do that all the time. In fact, this also is on a rising desk. The only reason I'm sitting right now is you could probably see a glare behind me, and if I were up higher, that's even worse. So
Mm-hmm.
so I'm sort of forced to sit until I can block that window off and eliminate the glare that's back there.
Yeah, you said you don't know why you didn't do that stuff before, and it's just because we've normalized, sitting. We've normalized it, just like we've
Yeah.
normalized the food that we eat nowadays. And I don't think it's really going to change until we unnormalize it. I don't know. That's not even a word, but until we take it
Yeah.
back.
No, and that's exactly my message. We need to create a paradigm shift. But to do that, you need everybody to do it.
Hmm.
And and if it's going to be too hard for everybody to begin exercising, which we've already proven to be true, can we at least start by getting people to move more? Um, I just was on a podcast last week and was asked this, or this came up in what you just said about normalizing sitting and stuff like that. So I'm going to ask you a question. Do you know which ailment causes the most people to miss work during the course of a year?
Miss work. I mean, just being sick. But I'm guessing you
Yeah.
mean what type of sickness, huh?
No, yeah, and it's not even a sickness. It's low back problems. Low back problems cause more people to miss work during the course. Now, why did I mention that to you? Because of what you just said a moment ago. Biomechanically, we are not designed to sit. We are designed to be upright. So if we spend most of our day sitting, is it a surprise that low back problems keep the most people out of work during the course of a year? No. And so in addition to the overall chronic health benefits that you get from going from sitting to standing throughout the day, it's also going to help our biomechanical stature as well.
I agree. So you said you work in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yes.
So, but you like to talk about more natural preventative ways of, like you said, preventative medicine. So
Yep.
what is that overlap between preventative medicine and the pharmaceutical industry? So how do you like? What is your belief on that? Since you see both
Yeah.
sides of the spectrum, where do
Yeah.
you sit? I know at some point, like you have to use pharmaceuticals at some
Yeah.
point, but we want to try to prevent that as long as possible. At least
Yeah.
that's how I understand it.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
nowadays it feels like doctors just throw medicine at it. So you come to the doctor, you're gonna walk out with a pill. That's how it
Yeah.
seems nowadays. So what is
Yeah.
that like fine line
So
there? Like how do we what's the question? How do we
how do
like
we marry those
yeah,
things up?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're asking. So, and I'll give you a couple of stories to answer that question. Um, First of all, I would totally concur with what you just said that um, what pharmaceuticals do, most of them, is to help alleviate a problem that we've already caused. What our message, mine and your message, is about preventing those things from ever happening to begin with. But it's sometimes biology is just stronger than what we can do. And so, for example, um, I I am. If I stood up and saw you, you'd see I'm thin, I'm healthy, I exercise, not as much as I used to, but I take medicine for high cholesterol. Why? And this goes also now another story to tell you what's my incentive for trying to get people to do this is that my father died when he was age 45, and he died from heart disease, and that's what's really driven me to say, okay, Jim, you've done the prevention rehab, you've been in the pharmaceutical industry, you know, retiring is next, but I'm not ready to do that until I get this message out, to look to try to create this paradigm shift with people. And so um, the way I really learned all of this was back in my late 20s, early 30s. I ran six marathon. No, I'm sorry. I ran four marathons in a period of 7 months. Now, I don't say that to impress anybody. It probably wasn't very smart, especially because of the Achilles tendonitis that I developed after that. But anyone that does a high volume of exercise knows that you do have to feed your body correctly when you're doing that. You can't be eating at McDonald's and snacking on potato chips and pretzels. You just won't be able to train appropriately. And after those 4 marathons, I had my cholesterol level checked, and it was the highest it ever was. And I knew then that biology and what I inherited from my father was truly having an impact. So I needed help. And I didn't want to wait until I was 40, 45, 50 because cardiovascular disease develops very silently, as do many of our chronic conditions. And so, you don't want to wait until you get close to a problem to begin to address it. So, yeah, I'm not a big proponent of pharmaceuticals as a first line defense where people can take more responsibility themselves. I'd like to see people do that. And if they're not going to exercise, can you at least begin by moving more? And then if you were to then take my challenge to you and start training specifically for high altitude climbing, slowly and gradually, eventually you could probably climb Mount Everest, which would be the equivalent then of somebody else looking to conduct 30 minutes of exercise 5 days a week.
Sorry, you still there? It started.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I forgot. I just went blank. Sorry.
That's
uh,
okay. Well, let me while you're thinking, let me uh, remind. Did you say you're located in New York?
no, I'm in Alabama.
Oh, that's right. Okay, all right. So I asked about New York because for people that are tennis fans right now, we know that the U.S. Open is taking place in New York right now, and one of the things that I say when I give speeches is, I've always tried to share things that have been motivational to me. And one of them is a saying, a quote attributed to Arthur Ashe. So the US Open, the stadium that they play the US Open in is Arthur Ashe Stadium. And he has a big plaque, big, it's over the entrance walking into the stadium that he wanted all the athletes to see when they were walking in to compete. And it says, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. So start where you are. If you're sedentary, just move more. Use what you have. Use your imagination to come up with your own ways. I just made some suggestions that people could move more, but the other half of my talk is trying to stimulate creativity in people so that they can come up with their own thoughts because maybe you don't get a newspaper. Maybe you don't work in an office building, or if you do, maybe it's a single floor, so you can't go up or down to refill your water bottle. But how can you then, in your day, replace being sedentary with movement? And the last part is do what you can. Everybody can move a little bit more. And so doing a little bit more each day will get you closer to where hopefully you want to be.
Yeah, I like that. I like. I have a quote that I like that goes similar to that, and it's, "You can't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 10." So it's kind of the same thing as, do what you can, start where you are. It's kind of the same concept.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
that comes this quote comes into like when people start comparing themselves. You see other people doing it. Like, for example, if I saw somebody climbing Mount Everest, like I can't be like, hey, I need to do that too. I got to start with, the small mountain and then work my way up to it. So I can't
Right.
compare, myself to where they're at now because I'm not where they are. Like I'm starting in a different place than where they are at now. But they started in the same place I'm at. They started at the beginning too. They
Right.
started at chapter 1, just like everybody else does. And they've gotten to where they are through consistency and effort and time. So
Yep.
yeah, I like that. You
No doubt.
mentioned, I just want to real quick for the listeners, you mentioned high cholesterol. So what exactly is high cholesterol and how is it affecting you?
Yeah. So, what is high cholesterol? That changes every few years based on new research that's continually being conducted. The general guidelines remain pretty much the same. You want to keep your overall number, your total cholesterol, below 200. So that's pretty easy. But then it is where it gets tricky. So then there is that's made up of it's made up of many different things. I'm just going to really keep it simple
Hmm.
and then talk about the LDL cholesterol, which we consider to be the bad cholesterol. LDL is low density cholesterol, and then the HDL, the high density cholesterol. What we've learned recently, so LDL is bad. And we used to have the guideline at about 130 and maybe below 100 for people with risk factors. What we're saying really now to anyone, the lower the better. So if you don't have risk factors and your LDL cholesterol is 90, does that mean you're healthy? Maybe not. So what can you do if you're eating a bad diet? You still want to improve your diet. And maybe you can drop that 90 down to 80 or even 70. The other half of that is the HDL cholesterol. We used to want that above 40 as a minimum. Below 40 was actually considered a risk factor. And then the higher, the better. In recent years, we've learned that perhaps what we thought about HDL being a really good thing doesn't matter as much. So there's more focus on the LDL cholesterol and then a whole bunch of subparticles that if you're concerned about that, talk to your cardiologist about and lower them. But just because your numbers appear to be normal, you still want to make sure you're consuming an appropriate diet. And I use the word appropriate because nobody's perfect. Um, You know, I know a lot about this stuff. I'd like to consider myself physically active and do that part. Could I be a better eater? Yeah, I could be. So we can all be a little bit better and do what we can to address the cholesterol. So that's just some general guidelines. You said you like to keep things simple, so I didn't want to
Hmm.
get too complicated with that answer.
No, that's great. So what kind of causes this LDL cholesterol? Is it, you mentioned bad diet? I know you mentioned a little bit about genetics. So is that how you kind of develop it? Lack of exercise, bad diet, genetics, or is there something like specific that would cause you to have this?
For the majority of people, um, the modifiable risk factors that we can have an influence on primarily through better physical activity patterns, better nutritional patterns, better management of stress are cholesterol, diabetes, and hypertension. And there's more, but
Mhm.
those are the main ones. The drivers are usually that raise them are usually poor diet and physical inactivity. So you reverse those and you can have an impact. But then biology does come into play, as I mentioned, the personal example about me. So it's important for all of us to pay attention to those, even if we might appear to be otherwise healthy.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. You talked a little bit about you're doing some motivational speaking now. So
Yeah.
so what does that look like? What are you talking on, and how did you get into kind of motivational speaking?
Um, the driver for it are two things: the premature death of my father. Um, I was also, believe it or not, he was 45 years old. Somehow he managed to have 8 children before he passed away. I was 13 years old. My youngest sister was one. And children that young shouldn't lose a parent because of things that they can have an impact on. Accidents are going to happen and uncontrollable diseases will impact some people, but for the vast majority, we can control that. So, um, that was one of the drivers. And then I've been fortunate enough that I've been given the opportunity this years ago, uh, and then even more recently. But I gave a talk at my former high school to the National Honor Society. And when I got up there, and you can probably tell I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories, and I like to use the stories to help reinforce a message. And so afterwards, and then a second, and I almost don't want to mention this because it might sound like I'm bragging, but um, I went to an undergraduate to the University of Delaware, and my PhD is from Temple University. And I was honored 10 years after I graduated from Delaware with a Distinguished Alumni Award. And so I needed to present then at the convocation ceremony for the College of Health Sciences. And so I mentioned those two things because I gave speeches, and they were more directed towards National Honor Society and college graduates. But I used the stories and included messages within those stories. And I had people come up to me afterwards and say things like, I really enjoyed that. That was fantastic. One person I can remember said, I could have listened to you all day. And so then when I've got this situation happen with my father, when I become a frustrated exercise physiologist because this powerful message about exercises is not resonating with the vast majority of Americans, and I started to think, well, what can we do differently? So can we change our message and simplify it and just get people to move more, something that everybody can do? And so that's driving me now to then give a fun, an inspirational, but a useful message to people. And that's what's driving me to this motivational speaking.
So these events are mainly, kind of health related, kind of like daily movement, like we're talking about now. That's what you're speaking on.
Yeah, but I can speak to any audience because
Mm-hmm.
the message pertains to anybody. And that even includes athletes, people that are physically active. And I say that because I'll go back to my example of developing Achilles tendonitis after running the marathons. I had Achilles tendonitis not for 5 days, not for 5 weeks, and it wasn't 5 months. I had very symptomatic Achilles tendonitis for 5 years, meaning that it was painful for me to get out of bed every morning. It hurt. So, and running was my big form of exercise. But what I was able to do is remain active otherwise during that time. So I say my message is important to athletes as well because we're all going to encounter an injury at some time. And when we have that injury, it's not the time to develop good habits. It's better to have developed them all along. So if you're a marathon runner, if you're a triathlete and you work in an office building, develop the habit of using a restroom on a different floor, of walking up and down to talk to somebody if you need to, of doing some of these other suggestions that I've made, because then if you are injured, you'll just be doing these things naturally. You remain active, or at least moving more than you would have otherwise.
Yeah, actually, I like to take a little lap around. I work on a construction site, so I'll take a lap around the job site, after lunch or so, just to get some movement in throughout my day, just to remain active. So it's
Exactly. Yeah. And just, yeah. How can you do more? How can you do more? That's my message to people. How can you replace being sedentary with moving? If you're the busy parent and you come home and you've done all this stuff with the kids that I've mentioned, maybe you need to check in with your parents before you help the kids with their homework. There's no reason for us to sit while we're talking to our parents. I'm not saying jump on a treadmill. What I'm saying is can you just meander around your house? Go up a flight of stairs if you have steps in your house. Gently, but just move more than you currently would, and basically avoid sitting. Just do something.
so beyond daily movement. Once you get that down pat, what would you say are kind of the next steps to move past the daily movement? Like, when it comes to
Yeah.
exercise, or like what is that next step for you to push it one step further?
Yeah. So I think what it really then comes down to is confidence for people. Remember, 25% of Americans are sedentary. And what that means is their movement that they do throughout the day consists of activities of daily living. So that means brushing your teeth. That means getting up, and using the bathroom. That means preparing your meals. That means taking your trash out. That's all that they're doing. And so it goes back to that hurdle that I talked about before, the barrier then between being sedentary and 150 minutes. So what I've seen, and then what I would hope for on a grand scale to create this paradigm shift, is that people, as they then move more, will recognize I am moving more. I've been doing this now for 2 or 3 months, or 8 or 9 months, or 12 or 15 months. I feel better about myself. Maybe I can go for a 10-minute walk or a 15-minute walk and then make that accomplishment. Great. It's still not 150, or if you take 150 and divide it by 5 and make it 30, it's still not 30, but it's 10. And if you've done all of these things and you've done it without really requiring time because you've just built it into your lifestyle, so then you only need to find 10 minutes to start, and you've got the confidence. That's what I think, Murphy, is the next step, is this level of confidence that people will think, boy, I really did very little before. Now I'm doing more and I've been doing it. So maybe I'm ready to try something a little bit more structured. And hopefully
Absolutely.
we'll
It's
make that
it's one
transition.
yeah, it's one of those things that when you start something new or you try something new, it's you when you're new at it, you're not very good at it. So it's a little bit discouraging, a little bit. You don't, you may not enjoy it as much. You don't see the benefit from it. It's not as fun. But as long as you keep doing it, and when you start seeing a little bit of progress, when you start getting a little better at it, when you start improving, and when it comes to fitness, maybe it's you start losing a little bit of weight, or you may start getting
Yeah.
stronger. That's when, like for me personally, I get hooked. Like that's when I'm
Yep.
like, okay, I see it now. I see why people do this now. Like I get it, and that makes me like want to take it a step further, and then that
Right.
works for me. So I think a lot of other people would operate that way as well. Is I know as soon as I got in the
Yeah.
gym, I was always very skinny as a kid. As soon as I got in the gym and put on some muscle mass and got a little bit stronger, like I got hooked from the get go, and that's all it took for me to keep going. And
Yeah.
then it got easy from there.
Yeah. And I think it's the same for everybody. The
Mm,
scale is just different, right? You were active at least and then got into something. And so that's great. But what we know is that most Americans are not doing much. And
mm.
so let's try to give them a message that they can do and simplify things for them. And that for me is to start by just moving more.
Yeah, but you got to be intentional. That's the thing is you got to be intentional about it. A lot of people think.
And
Go ahead.
think about it, right? Come
Hmm.
up with your own ideas. Don't depend on me. On my website, I do put new ideas that I come up with all the time. To I'm right now. You probably can't tell, but I work on the second floor. Just one more simple example, and I just think of them the other day. So the other day I needed to talk to my son about something, and so he was downstairs. And what do most people do? They walk to the top of the stairs and they yell down, to their child, to ask the question. And I was about to do that. I was like, "What? Wait a minute! Don't do that. Walk down the steps, go and ask him the question, and then come back up the steps." Just another simple way, just to add more movement.
Yeah. It's trying to get people to realize that, or how to like break that little barrier just to get them going.
Yeah.
It just takes that one little thing to get them going in the right direction, and then it's a lot easier to get going from there. I like to say, make your bed in the morning as soon as you got out the bed, because it's kind of like you check the box. You check the box first thing in the morning. I don't like making my bed. I'll be honest. I don't like it, but I do it every day because it sets me up for a path of success for that day. I check that box, done. That's one thing done for the day. Now I'm on to the next, and then you check the next
Yeah.
box. So that's how it operates for me better. Like if I can, if I have something to get me going, it's a little easier. So we got to find ways to get people that little trigger. It's like a trigger for them to figure out what that trigger is for them to get them going, to get them
Yeah.
moving. Because
That's,
go ahead.
so let me add to that. So let me add to that because that's a perfect, and I do the same thing. But let me add to that. So, you make your bed. Some people might just walk to the end of the bed and flip their covers up and let them fall. But I would say go on the one side of your bed, pull the sheets up, walk around to the other side of the bed, pull those sheets up, put the pillow on this side, walk around. Look for a way to take that simple activity and just add the 10 steps that it creates to go around, and then the 10 steps that get. Those are 20 steps that you wouldn't have done that day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to take any time. So you're right. Start, and that's a simple way to. In fact, I'm going to have to make a video about that now to put it up on my website because I just thought of that one. So thank you for the idea.
Oh, absolutely. I do the same thing. When I hear other people have good ideas, I have a list on my phone. I write it down, and I use them on the podcast. I do that all the time.
Yep. Yeah. I learned a long time ago from I forget who it was, but a well recognized public speaker. They said, steal shamelessly. And that sounds bad, but it's actually very good because you have to remember that really nothing that you and I are coming up with, we are the originators of. And the people we heard it from, they weren't the originators either. And the people they heard it from weren't the originators either. So, but then by sharing a message you learn from somebody else, that you're actually paying a compliment to that individual. So, and I do. I look and on my website, I ask for people to send me ideas that they have come up with to add more movement to their day, and I'll be glad to post them up on my website because I'm not the be all end all of ideas.
Yeah, there's a quote out there that covers this exactly. It's like good artists take and great artists steal or something like that. It's something I can't remember what
Yeah,
the quote is, but it exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. Let me. So since we're on the quotes, I'll also share a couple of them from a person that we've all heard of, Albert Einstein. As I said, I'm trying to get people to think differently, re-engineer your day. And one of the quotes he's known for saying is, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." And that's good for that thought process. But then I saw another quote that he also said. He said, "Nothing happens until something moves." So nothing happens with our body until we move it. And that's taking a quote from a legend and applying it in a very simplistic manner.
Hmm. So when it comes to fitness, there's this concept of all or nothing. I know you definitely preach against this, but like what how do you address people with that mentality, the all or nothing mentality? Like if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it all in, or if I can't do it all in, then I'm just not gonna do it at all. I know this is a big one in fitness because you don't have to be perfect every week. Like you said, it just takes a
Yeah.
little bit of daily movement. And if you miss one day, that's okay. Like you can do it the next day. So how would you address
Yeah.
the all or nothing mentality?
Yeah. Now I could be wrong about this because I think about that, and the other old saying, "No pain, no gain," kind of a thing. That's bad, by the way.
Hmm.
That's bad because pain is a signal from the body that something is wrong. Um, so maybe a little bit discomfort is good. But yeah, throwing it all in, I think I could be wrong about this, but I think that we generally hear that probably from athletes, probably from competitive people. And, you know, maybe there are some people that, and I'm trying to reach them, but I'm really trying to reach the masses that aren't them. And, you know, is it really that hard if you're completely sedentary just to get up from your desk a few times a day more? So that's not all. That's very simple. Um, but that would be. I don't know. Do you know? Do you have a sense? Do you generally hear that from people that are more competitive, maybe more athletic, or have you heard it from?
I see it from
Common.
both sides of the spectrum. I think
Okay.
for the masses, I think it's kind of like you mentioned. There's a barrier between doing nothing and doing 150 minutes of activity.
Right.
Well, I think the masses may think, well, if I can't do the 150 minutes a week, then it's not in my best interest to do it at all. You know what I'm saying? I might as well
Yeah.
just not do it if I can't do it all. You know, all of it. It's all. I'm either
Yeah.
going to do all 150 minutes or I'm not going to do any of
Yeah.
it. So
Okay.
that's kind of how I'm coming at it.
Yeah. So I would then make sure that I reinforce that data that I already shared, that just the simple act of going from sitting to standing resulted in changes in fasting blood sugar and body fat mass. I'll cite another study. So we all then, maybe the all in is this magical 10,000 steps that we've heard many times. But there was a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association just a couple of years ago in 2022 that indicated that adding an additional 2,000, now it went up to 10,000, but starting with an additional 2,000 steps per day resulted in 8 to 11% fewer deaths and less heart disease and cancer. And for those individuals in those 2,000 or more steps that actually accomplished them moving faster, there was even more health benefit. So I think both of those studies cite that you don't have to go all in.
Mm-hmm.
Just use your stand-up desk. Get up once an hour. That's not all in. That's a very simple adjustment. And then after you get comfortable with that, can you get up twice an hour? And then can you get a walking desk and maybe turn that on for 15 minutes of a conference call and then add a little bit more. I think there's a lot of ways that you don't need to go all in, but you can make the subtle changes. And the rationale would be is there is scientific data to suggest that there's health benefits from doing that. And I've got other articles. I've got a pile of them behind me on the desk, some which I've read, some a lot more that I still have to read. And I could cite a lot more, but there are significant health benefits to the simple things.
Mm-hmm. We gotta change people's mindset of instead of all or nothing, it should be something is better than nothing. You know,
Something
something's better than
exactly,
nothing. I think that's kind of the better way to think about it, the better mindset to have around
exactly.
it. So
Love
if
the wording there.
yeah, so if someone's listening and they feel a little overwhelmed and inactive, what is the very first step that they could take today? You know, to start improving their health.
Just add one thing. Add
Mm-hmm.
one thing. So, well, today they've probably gotten their newspaper in their mail. If they're going to call on somebody and talk to somebody a little bit later, just don't sit while you're doing it. And just stay in your living room. Don't even meander around the house, but just be standing and just take some steps. Just walk forward, walk backward. That's just one thing. If you're watching the baseball game tonight, um, instead of watching the TV commercials, every commercial, get up and go refill your water glass, and then come back. By the way, if you do that, it's going to cause you to have to go to the restroom more. So now you're going to have to get up to go to the restroom. And if you happen to live in a house that's 2 stories high, use the restroom on a different floor than you're on. Those are just very one, and that's a beautiful question, Murphy, and thanks for asking that because that's the message I think that we're both trying to suggest for a lot of people. Other people, they're trying to ramp up from 150 to 300 minutes. That's great. But for this large majority of people, just do something simple. Just change one thing tonight before you go to bed. And then tomorrow, maybe add a second thing. And then just look for ways. Just become your own, challenge yourself to come up with a new way that fits into your lifestyle, your environment, that you can replace being sedentary with some sort of movement.
Yeah, I like that answer. Just add one thing. I always like to say you just need to do more than what you were doing yesterday. So like
Right.
if you're not doing nothing, then don't try to commit to go to the gym 5 days a week because you're probably not going to stick to that. It's not necessary. Just start with one day, and then once you get used to that, then you can go to 2 days. Start add one thing, like I said, just one. Don't try to do too much because then people get overwhelmed and they get burnt out after a while, and they haven't built a habit around it yet. So it's hard for them to stick to it with it being so new. So I like your answer. Just add one thing, and then build on that. Add another thing down the road, and then add another thing after that. So I like that answer a lot.
I want to emphasize the one word that you just said that's critical to this: habit. That's what we want. We want to make it a
Hmm.
habit. I don't any I shouldn't say anymore. I rarely use the restroom on the floor that I'm on in my house. To me, I just automatically go to the stairs, and since I'm up on the second floor, go down to use the bathroom. Or if I'm downstairs after dinner or watching TV, I automatically come upstairs. So I'm just not preaching things. These are all things that I've added to my day. A few years ago when my son was too young to drive and I had to take him to get his hair cut. Yeah, you're just sitting there in the stylist, watching them get their hair cut for 15 or 20 minutes. And one time I thought to myself, wait, why am I sitting here? I don't need to be sitting here. And it's in the shopping center. So I said, to my son, I said, I'll be back. And I just got up and walked, and I just walked up and down the stores for 10 or 15 minutes and then come back. That's what I'm talking about by trying to replace moving with being sedentary.
Yeah, I like that. So outside of just moving, what are some general like exercise things you would suggest to people, like beyond just getting movement, like steps in
Yeah.
throughout the day?
Yeah. No, movement is critical. Find all kinds of movement. I'm going to emphasize, especially for my generation, the older people, you know, do with the movement, um, try to do something that includes resistance training. That
Hmm.
can be very light dumbbells. It can be stretch bands. It could be a carton of milk or a half a carton of milk. Some people think, so again, here comes the simplified thinking. They think, a gallon of milk, it's too heavy for me. I can't do that. Okay, finish the milk and then put a little bit of water in it. Right? People don't think about that. It's either the 8 pounds that the gallon of milk weighs. So go back to your thought about it's all or nothing. And they don't
Hmm.
think, oh, wait a minute. So now that I'm done the milk, I've got an empty container. I can just um, put some water in it, and just do something to create some resistance training. And then the other thing, especially for it's important for everybody, but for people getting a little bit older, is just to build some flexibility into your routine. So again, you don't have to designate time. You're sitting there at your desk. Push your chair back and bend over and just try to stretch a little bit for a minute. Not going to add time to your day, but just adding these simple things throughout the day cumulatively will definitely make a difference, but definitely including both some resistance and some flexibility stuff.
Yeah, it's sticking to the basics. A little bit of resistance and some mobility type stuff. I like body weight exercises. I think those are great
Yep.
as well. Resistance bands are a great way for beginners to start doing some resistance training. Simple things like that. Push ups,
Yeah.
squats, things like that. You can do these in your living room. So I like to preach.
Yeah.
Just start in your living room. You don't have to go to the gym to get some exercise in. You can do it pretty much anywhere. Go outside,
Yeah.
play in the yard with your kids. I like to say that a lot.
Yep.
Shoot some
Absolutely.
basketball.
Yeah.
Things like that are just active. Throw the football with your kids, baseball, whatever it is.
Run with your
Um,
dog or your cat, anything like
mhm.
that. I just looked over my shoulder because I was going to show something, that I came up with long ago in the spirit of resistance, but I don't see it there anymore. But again, people, equipment, and all that kind of stuff. So one of the things I came up with years ago when I was doing the rehab for somebody that wanted to do a little bit of resistance training is squeeze something. So a ball. Well, what kind of ball? You can't squeeze a baseball. You can't squeeze a softball. What about a tennis ball? Oh well, tennis ball are hard. I mean, they're you can't squeeze them. So what I did for this one person the one time is I took a can of tennis balls, and I want to say that this with caution. I did this for them, but I took a can of tennis balls and a utility knife, and I took one tennis ball and I basically made a slit in it and cut it in half. And then the second tennis ball, I took it and I made a slit in it and cut it less than half. And then the third one, I just put a little bit of slit in it. Now, with a single can of tennis balls, I had three different resistances for squeezing.
Hmm.
So just think differently. Think differently. Let me, this is a bizarre example, but if you'll indulge me for a minute, before my father died, he was the epitome of I think creativity, and he did this for us. He loved to fish, so he knew about boats, and he actually built the last boat that he used for fishing. He got the boat hull from the boat yard, and they put the engine in it, and he built the rest of it. Now, he never told me this, Murphy, but I'm going to suggest that this went through his mind. He had 8 kids, and he's got to keep 8 kids busy while he's working on this boat. So what he did is he went back to the boat yard and he got a second boat hull, 32-foot fiberglass boat hull. And then he dug a hole in our backyard and he put the boat hull in it. And then he built a wooden deck around it. And we ended up with a swimming pool from a boat hull. Now, what does that have to do with movement? Nothing. But what it does show is this also, and this is what I'm trying to create in when I do the public speaking, is a mindset of thinking differently. So if my father could see a swimming pool in a boat hull, I would encourage your listeners, how can you go about your day looking for new ways to introduce movement, resistance with tennis balls, anything? You or I, we don't have all the ideas. People are sitting there, but we often put blinders on to potential things that we can do. And, I'm looking to try to help change that as well.
Yeah, we gotta start thinking outside the box and get creative because
Exactly.
everybody's schedule, everybody's life looks different. Different things going on, different times of the day. So you gotta get creative. And it's hard to give everybody an answer. So
Yep.
just you gotta get people thinking creatively,
Yep.
thinking outside the box. So
Yep.
of ways they can add some movement. But yeah, we're coming up on an hour now. I want to respect your time. Before we get off, is there anything you want to ask me or any social media or anything that you would like to plug? If you have a website, if you want to let
Yeah.
everybody know where they can find you at.
Well, first of all, I'll thank you. I thank you for the opportunity. I'm biased. I think this is a really important message because it's so simple and it's something that everybody can do. But we just need to get a lot of people on board. So, yeah, I do have a website. It's my name, Jim Walter Speaks. So, all one word, jimwalterspeaks.com. My email address is jim@jimwalterspeaks.com. Um, I won't even bother saying it, but my telephone number is also on the website. The website offers also some glimpses of what I speak about. It also offers the ability to check out some of these what I call them move more moments. So it offers up the move more moments, which I change frequently. Those move more moments can also be seen on Instagram at Jim Walter Speaks on Instagram. So those things change, and if people are interested in this content, they have a meeting coming up, and they want something that would be fun, that would be inspirational and useful to their audience. I welcome the chance to speak to them.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you for preaching this message. It definitely needs to get out there to more people. Movement can go such a long way in people's lives, and I just don't think enough people realize that yet. So the more you can spread the message, the better. So I'm glad that you hopped on the podcast today to talk about it. I'm sure our listeners will enjoy this one. Um, and yeah, I just want to thank you for coming on to the podcast. I enjoyed our time together, and
Likewise.
I think that's all I got for you. Um,
Okay.
So yeah, appreciate it, and Well, yeah, y'all tune in next week for another episode of the Fitness Beginner Podcast.